Welcome to the Boyk Brief, a production of the Charles Boyk Law offices in Toledo, Ohio. Join us as we explore real legal cases, talk to fascinating people in our area, raise awareness about community initiatives, and share helpful information about protecting yourself and those you love.
Today on the podcast, we have one of my favorite people and probably my favorite client of all time, Robert Lucas, Bob Lucas. We met in 2003 under some very tragic circumstances, and I think it would be fantastic for him to share his story, how he's overcome a tremendous amount of hardship to live a productive life. He's funny, he's opinionated, but one thing he is very entertaining. So we have with us today Bob Lucas. Bob, good to see you.
All
right. So Bob, we met in 2003. Why don't you tell people, you were living in Bryan, Ohio at that time. Tell me about your life and your occupation and how things were going in 2003 before the accident that led me and you to meet each other.
Okay. Yeah. Back in 2003, I was a general labor, union labor for a construction company. And it just so happened that I was in an accident. Somebody accidentally run me into 7,200 volts and it blew through across my chest and blew out my other side and almost blew my arm off. And back when I woke up out of a coma in the hospital, my wife took the phone book, which is a very huge, thick Toledo phone book, and she called probably at least close to a dozen lawyers in the Toledo area. And one lawyer showed up at the intensive care burn unit, and his name was Chuck Boyk. And that's how Chuck and I met. He was the only lawyer that actually came to the hospital to see me. And since then, I've been through probably to date, probably at least 30 surgeries, at least, and some of them major surgeries. They had to kind of reconstruct my body and use skin from other parts of my body. I have skin grafts all over, burns, because when the 7,200 volts went through me, it was like a big ball of flame that burnt my skin. Burnt pretty bad. And Chuck and I's worked together and done a wonderful job. Chuck did a wonderful job as a lawyer on this case. I don't know if I go into detail right at the moment, but he obviously did a great job. He called in expert witnesses from out of state that had to do with the electrical codes and things like that, and took them to the actual site of the accident, and they looked around and they looked everything else, which was very beneficial to this case because we wanted to know what was going on. And it's just that I have to get in my head that it was not my fault. Somebody else did this to me,
So Bob, let's talk about some of the specifics. You were working as a general laborer, and this happened in Defiance, Ohio?
Correct.
And why don't you explain about the forklift and what happened at the accident scene?
What happened at the accident scene? We was doing some site work. I was doing some site work for this company. We were getting the land ready to expand their parking lot, and it just so happened that a guy from the school that was nearby said, "Hey, could you tie up this cable, this TV cable line, because we can't get into our dumpsters?" And of course, nice guys that we are, we said sure. And I was with the foreman. I was in the backhoe bucket, and I made 3 ties, and I went to make the 4th tie, and he accidentally, which there's a lot to do with that too. The sun was in his eyes. He was on a cell phone, with the owner of the company, and he was running a backhoe with me in the bucket, unfortunately. And then he run it into 72 volts, and it come through me, through my chest area, and blew out. And I blew out of the bucket, landed on my head. My eye popped out of the socket, and I was laying there dead. Well, they brought me back to life, and life flighted me to St. Vincent's in Toledo. I ended up in a burn unit.
So how long were you in intensive care in the burn unit?
I was actually in a chemically induced coma for 28 days. And then the total stay, not in intensive care, but in the actual burn unit, was 87 days. It was almost 3 months that I was in the hospital, and I couldn't leave. And I with all the burns, see, burn wounds are very difficult to heal and to maintain. They're real difficult. Burn units, burns are. So yeah, there's looking pretty right there. That was right after I woke up, because most of my body was wrapped up before.
So you were unconscious. I mean, you actually don't remember the electric shock.
Correct? Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. And
So,
also in the burn unit, they give you this medicine to make you not remember that stuff.
so you were unconscious for what, over a month?
I was in a chemical induced coma for 28 days.
Okay. And I remember, Bob, I met you and your wife, Michelle. And I remember I had to go to the burn unit at St. V's, and I had to wear all the gowns and everything.
Oh, right, right.
Because obviously they were afraid of getting you a MRSA infection.
MRSA, yes, which I did end up getting MRSA. And that's pretty nasty to have too.
I'm not trying to have you remember this, but just maybe let's talk about the specific injuries you had. I'm looking at, I mean, you had both a personal injury case, you had a workers' compensation case, you had a Social Security disability case, but I mean, you had dislocated ankle, burns throughout virtually your entire body, a closed head injury. Talk about your vision. That was something that was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, they were
the impact on your vision.
Yeah, they were worried about my vision. See, when I hit the ground after that initial electrical shock, it popped my eye out of its socket, my right eye, and then they popped it back in on the scene. And then I had before I left the burn unit, I actually had cataract in my one eye, and I had to have it had already matured, so I had to have the cataract surgery, and remove the cataract out of my eye. And they thought that I possibly would have been blind, but thank God I wasn't. And I come out of it with, not the best vision, but I still can see. Yeah, it was pretty rough on the eyes. Well, number one, that the initial flash was so bright that would almost burn your eyeballs, just seeing that flash right in front of your face.
So after you finally got out of the hospital, I went to your house, and you were finally able to get around, and we went out to the accident scene. I think you might remember that, Bob,
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So initially, when you went out to the accident scene, you were able to explain to us how this happened, so we could initially do the investigation and try to determine what expert witnesses to hire. And then after that, I know we went out with some various expert witnesses that we hired across the country to evaluate the scene. Was it difficult for you to go back to the scene?
Oh, I don't know if it was really difficult. Oh, yeah. Well, see, I went there with my wife. We went in the car, and of course, the big, tough, macho stud guy that I am started crying like a little baby. But it was pretty tragic, very tragic accident. But but then when I went with you guys, I was pretty content. But yeah, it's still not a good feeling to even go by that. I rarely go by it, but every once in a great while I go by where it happened, and it's like, I don't even like to see that, tell you the truth.
Yeah, so I think you could see it there. So one of the issues on a case like yours, it's not like there's a car accident where they actually do any really large investigation. We had an incident report, but that's pretty much all we had to go on initially. So in your case, we had to hire an electrical expert from out of state. We had to hire a forklift expert from out of state. We had to hire an economist and a vocationalist to demonstrate the damages in this sort of situation. But it was interesting. This happened in Defiance, and there potentially were so many defendants. I think we had to sue maybe 8 to 10 defendants initially. So we were able to sue in Lucas County, Ohio. And it's funny, Lucas County is named after Robert Lucas. So I thought it was kind of interesting that, we sued in the county named after the governor, an old governor of Ohio, but I guess it was your name too. So talk about the process as a client when the attorney's trying to explain to you what we're doing and why you're doing it. I'm assuming there's a lot of uncertainty early on in the process.
Oh, yeah, but it was rather hard for you to figure out what's going on, what actually happened here. It was rather hard for all of us to figure out what happened because, like I said, I was in a coma for 28 days and they give me medicine not to remember anything from the accident because, they like scrape the wounds and all that good stuff. And, we didn't have a whole heck of a lot to go on. We only had, the 2 or 3 people that actually witnessed it, and which I wasn't a very good witness because, of what happened. It happened to me. But I don't know. I think it all worked out. I guarantee, I know for a fact it all worked out for the best. I mean, the best the situation could get.
Right. So one thing that was interesting is that we really did depositions, which are like statements under oath of all of the people involved in the incident, all of their supervisors, all of the various expert witnesses, both on our side and on the other side. And it was kind of interesting. All the different defendants were pointing the finger at each other. So that was kind of one of the goals where you like it when instead of just pointing the finger at you, which they really weren't doing, they were pointing the fingers at each other, which made our life a whole lot better.
Right. Number one, the cable line shouldn't have been hanging that low. Number two, the company I work for shouldn't have volunteered me to tie it up. It's just something we should have even had our nose in. We shouldn't even have been involved in it.
And part of it is they put you up in a backhoe
bucket, a front bucket.
Right. And you're really not supposed to put a person in a backhoe bucket because there's absolutely no safety devices.
Right. And no, I wasn't. Right there's the bucket, a picture of the bucket. No, I wasn't tied off or anything.
And you certainly don't lift people up that have no expertise near powered electrical lines.
Right. This was just a cable line. The power lines were much higher. And being the sun was in his eyes and he wasn't paying attention, he was on a cell phone. He run me up as high as that backhoe would go to run me into those power lines. They weren't down low with the cable line. They were way up. And he raised that on his own up into those high potential lines right there. And that's what caused the accident.
So our litigation, meaning the lawsuit and the depositions, took a couple of years. And I'm assuming during that time period, you were hoping for the best, but you were in the midst of not being able to work. You were undergoing regular medical attention, and you
Yeah.
had all that uncertainty in your life and your future. I'm assuming that that time period must have been, you know, extremely difficult for you and your family.
Oh, I imagine it definitely was for me, and probably worse for my family because I was a raging lunatic. I mean, I had PTSD. I didn't know what was coming or going sleep wise. It was rather difficult.
Right. I mean, your wife Michelle, who I've met on numerous occasions. I mean, she was probably a saint to marry you in the first place. But
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I'm still a lunatic. I'm never get rid of that.
right. But I mean, to overcome that and to deal with that could not have been very easy.
Oh yeah, she's a saint, definitely, to put up with what all happened, and she stayed with me up there at the burn unit for the 87 days at a place right next to St. Vincent's Hospital called Home Away from Home. She stayed up there with me and come home on the weekends.
So eventually, we did all the depositions. You had to have your deposition and tell your story. Um, was that a scary event for you, or
No, it wasn't at all. All I did is I told the truth. That's all I did was I went there and I told the truth. And I also know that it's all over with now. But I know let's just say the other side lied quite often in their depositions, and I don't care if it's under oath or not. They made up all kinds of stories to try to cover themselves.
so? Oftentimes, when I was a young attorney in the 80s and 90s, lots of cases go to trial and cases still go to trial, but they have a process called the mediation process. So in this case, when we got really close to trial, within like 3 or 4 months of trial, we went through a mediation process, and we had a private mediator whose job was to try to talk us down from our original number and talk the defendants up. And in this case, it was kind of difficult because there were a lot of different defendants, and they all were pointing fingers at each other, and they all wanted the other defendant to pay most of the money. Were you happy with the mediation process?
Oh yeah, I think and when we did go in for that final mediation, I think that the guy did an excellent, perfect job. I think he was very professional about how he did that, how he took care of things, and and I don't know. I just think he did a great job when we were doing that mediation with that deal.
So in your case, we eventually settled for an undisclosed confidential amount, and we're not going to mention any of the names of the defendants because of an agreement.
Right.
But over the years, I mean, once your case was settled, you and I still kept in touch because you still have to this day an ongoing workers' compensation case where you're still being treated 18 years later, correct?
Yeah, and I still see a doctor for this accident too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we also were able to help you in Social Security disability. I remember we had to go to a hearing in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yeah, which was really odd.
Yeah, that was odd that we had to go to Indiana for this.
Right.
But over the years, we've kept in touch, and I think you're probably one of my best referral sources. You've referred me a tremendous amount of really serious accidents, and I've really enjoyed representing those people. So explain, like, how do you spend your time currently?
Well, I had a stroke a couple years ago. My son and my grandson and we mess around with cars. We have like muscle cars, and our grandkids live with us, and it's just family deal, I guess. I don't know. I can't really explain it. But the whole hee-haw gang's there. We're all there. We're all there.
So, most people don't have to face adversity as serious as you have in your life, Bob. And that's one of the reasons I respect you for still having a fantastic attitude and basically making the best of a very traumatic situation. Can you explain like the impact of this on your life? I mean, how old were you when the accident happened?
40.
And I'm assuming you planned on continuing to work as a union laborer.
I love my job. See, that's what really is the bad thing about this is I love my job. I was always to work early. I just love my job. I love doing construction. At the time, I was building bridges. We was just doing that site work temporarily, and then I was going to a big bridge over the Maumee River, but I never made it there. And I love my job. I mean, you can ask anybody that ever worked with me. I was always there early in the morning. It was fun. And you have to enjoy your job or you'll be miserable the rest of your life. But everything's different now from the way it used to be. Physically, I can't hardly do anything. I'd love to be out there running a jackhammer or laying pipe or driving a dump truck, all that good stuff that I used to love doing. So we just make do. We mess with old cars now, and I don't know, and nothing really too physical.
So, what would be your advice to people that are seriously injured? I'm sure you probably never even thought something like this could happen to you.
No, not at all. And my advice, if you get seriously injured, I would check everything out and check with a lawyer. I mean, don't let a company tell you, say, oh, no, you don't need a lawyer. We'll take care of you. Because it just so happens in this situation, if I would have let the company take care of me, well, that company's been out of business for years. So how would I have been taken care of? I wouldn't have been taken care of. And thank goodness I was a union laborer at the time, making union scale and a good job, for you to represent me, what it takes to make my life back halfway normal, if so to speak.
So one thing I thought that was really helpful is sometimes clients don't do what the attorney tells them to do. And in our case, I felt comfortable because I could explain what the strategy was, why we were doing it, because my goal was basically to get buy-in from you so you would understand there was a bigger purpose and what the game plan was and what the end plan was. And I thought that you were very cooperative and provided a lot of information that was helpful to get the best result for us.
Right. Thanks. Yeah.
Any other lessons like as far as your life goes? I mean, they always say that if you're seriously injured, you basically learn to appreciate life differently. I'm assuming there's a lot of things like you took for granted before that maybe you have a different perspective on.
Yeah, there's a few things. I was going to touch on something, Chuck, and this is to anybody out there in the world. If you feel leery about doing something that you're asked to be done by your foreman, your superintendent, plant manager, whatever, if you feel leery down inside about doing it, don't do it. Because if you could end up in the same situation that happened to me. So I'm just for everybody to be careful, be leery about what you do. They might want you to do it, but if it don't seem safe, do not do it. I just wanted to add that. But on the other part, oh goodness, I kind of forgot what you said, Chuck. I'm sorry.
So like you don't take life for granted. I think most of us take life for granted. And now, I mean, you were almost clinically dead and then you were alive again. I mean, you appreciate every day now.
Right. Don't take life for granted in any way at all, because it could end immediately. You could be gone in a second. Thank God I wasn't. I have no clue yet to this day why God kept me around. I guess for my grandkids or something, but I'm still around. So yeah, don't take life for granted, because it could end so soon.
Anything else you would want to let people know about the entire process or your accident that we haven't touched upon, Bob?
No, but one thing, be patient. Be patient, because this stuff don't happen overnight. Sometimes it may take a while for the process to go through. Just be patient, and don't jump on the first, say you have a case and you get a amount they offer you. Don't jump on the first thing offered to you. Don't, be patient. This is the rest of your life you have to worry about. This isn't going to end tomorrow. This is for the rest of your life. Be patient on this. It might take a while. Our case wasn't really, I don't think, that long, but it was, it was like over 3 years. But still, I don't know. That's kind of my thought. Just be patient.
Okay. Bob, I appreciate you being with us today. Like I said, you're probably my favorite client of all time.
Great.
A great friend, a great referral source, and I wish you and your family only the best in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, Chuck.
Take care. Bye.
You too.
Thank you for joining us on the Boyk Brief. Tune in next time for more stories of law and life.